Okay, this is Richard Nikoley, and I have with me Moritz. Bierling.
Bierling.
Yeah. Like beer. You're a
That's
beer.
right. That's right. It actually means beer in German.
But you're also a hamburger.
I am a hamburger. Yes, I am from Hamburg, Germany, which is the namesake of our favorite food. Yes.
I was, when we were getting, back and forth, like, okay, when do we start? When do we start? And I said, I am going to go jump in the pool for a bit, get a little bit of, actually even here in Thailand, the pool is pretty cool. It's not like warm, huh? And I'm thinking, how do I start off? I'm like, well, one thing I've always been curious about with you since I met you and we first spoke is your command of the English language. It's like you don't have any, difficulties, whatever. And the thing is, here in I live in this the south of Phuket, the island of Phuket in Thailand. It's high expat dense, but most of the expats are Europeans. And lots of Germans, Swiss Germans, Belgians, French, Italians, you name it, Brits, you name it, Dutch, everybody. But what I find, I've been in Thailand for the last 2 years, but the last year, I moved here on December 31st of 2020. So I lived here the entire 2021, and now we're into 2022. I love it here. I tell people, I say, within 5 kilometers, I can eat more good international food than any place I've ever either lived or been in the world. I'm talking about right. We're in downtown San Francisco, New York, Chicago. You can eat a bigger variety of good, authentic food. And these are restaurants that are owned by expats who are actual Italians and Swiss and Germans and the Belgians actually have some of the best restaurants here. 3 restaurants here are just fantastic. The Belgian, they actually fly in oysters from Normandy and mussels from Netherlands every Friday.
Quite the effort.
Yeah. Well, one of the restaurants, Viking, owned by Timmy. I come in Friday. I said, Timmy, the oysters here yet? He's like, no. I said, when did they get here? He says, hang on, let me call the pilot. But anyway, so how old? I forgot your age yet.
I'm about to turn 29 this month.
Shit, 29. Shit. My girlfriend turned 29 last week, just so you know. But I suspect that in your international workings, because I remember back when it was on Facebook, you spent quite a stage in the US and different places, but you're always, collaborating internationally with people. You probably deal in English far more than any other language.
All the
right?
time. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think in English. Like, I don't have internal German monologue. I have internal English conversation, basically, and sometimes I have to sort of force myself to write my journal entries in German, so I like there's still some soul left in that language.
Well, back when I lived in France for 2 years with a job that was in French exclusively, and I was there for 2 years. It was at about the 6-month point where I felt myself being so fully fluent that I even started dreaming in French.
Right.
One time I was on a ship, and we were at sea for 2 months, I think. And I think I didn't speak I didn't speak any English in 2 months, right? And so your mind does kind of transform, right?
Yep.
So I was thinking about all of this, and my father was born. I've told you before. My father was born in Stettin, which is now Szczecin, Poland, right? I was actually doing a couple. He's 83, but he came to the U.S. and when he was 14. I still remember as a little boy when he was in his 20s, 30s, he had a bit of a German accent. But you talk to him now, you would not know. You would have no idea he was born in that English was a second language, right?
Right.
I was telling him a little bit about you, and I said I asked him. I said, "Do you still understand it?" He says, "Well, I still laugh when I see old war movies, and the German soldiers are actually of English or American who are speaking German." So right.
Right. Yeah.
So he'll watch this, and so for Lothar Nikoley, how about you say like a sentence, 2 or 3, whatever. Don't tell us what you said, because I'm going to ask him what you said. So I'm putting you on the spot. Spotlight.
Lothar, ich hoffe, dass du deinen Sohn gut erzogen hast und dass du stolz auf ihn sein kannst. Und kannst mir einmal durch Richard erzählen, ob das der Fall ist.
Okay. All right. Good. We'll just leave that right there. He'll enjoy that. I told him I was going to do that. He says, "Yeah, sure."
Nice.
Right. Okay. So let's see. Anything more about? Okay. So what I wanted to go with next is tech, because that's what you're all about. But
A good deal, yes.
But what is it? What's exciting? I mean, beyond like, what's the next social media fucking platform, right? What's going to be useful and either affects people in a global sense directly, or it's underneath whatever they're using. It's the the works underneath that's going on, right?
Right.
Before you start, because maybe you can integrate this into what I'm talking about. So my blog, freetheanimal.com, I'd been thinking about it for a long time, but then I just pulled the plug. So I've always had my own hosting. I can switch the raw host who has my WordPress installation. I can do that like that. I can switch in 2 hours, really, from a backup. And I'm talking about 5,000 posts, 110,000 comments, and thousands of images, and it's all in a database, and so it goes in. But here's the thing. So I'm all self-hosted, so nobody can censor me, except for the fact that because I have a standard, econ domain name, that they just go right to the source and say, we've stripped your domain. So I'm vulnerable there, and I understand that there's this new sort of system. I actually have a domain on something called Unstoppable Domains, and it's a sort of a blockchain domain system. So I don't know if that's involved in any of the tech that you're doing. So tell us what you're doing.
Sure. You already went into the direction that I think most people are familiar with, and that touches people in their lives most, which is crypto in general. And of course, it is, even though it is, I'm not like a fanatic about it, it is certainly astonishing how far it's come in terms of just name recognition and cultural impact in the brief time of, at this point, like 13, 14 years since Bitcoin really came around. Think about it's sort of the age of a teenager, and it has already created at least something that some people call a market cap of a number of $1 trillion in various forms. But so I'm not super interested and super focused on the purely financial side of crypto. It is interesting because it provides a tech that basically makes it so that organizations that wish to interact with each other, and individuals too, can draw on a shared underlying data layer that none of them individually owns and directs, and therefore there's sort of this cooperative game that can be played with that. But it really isn't this sort of panacea that a lot of the more starry-eyed idealists make it out to be. Like, for most things, you don't need a blockchain. For most things, you just need a database and secure it well. But when it comes to sort of these network economies and network societies and areas and domains where accountability can't easily be guaranteed by transparency, that's maybe an area where you might want to choose to employ that. But so that's sort of one topic, the crypto stuff, and we can go into more detail in various forms there. But another one that I'm not myself personally doing much with, but that I have a friend who's doing stuff with, is genetic editing.
Is what?
Genetic editing.
Genetic editing.
Or biohacking. Like, it's a larger term, but genetic editing is one of those things that falls under that. And what he's doing is fairly interesting. And just as an example, there are many other things that are happening there. But one of the things he's doing is basically they've created and developed a method of cheaply and reversibly for injecting genetic edits into the human genome in a localized fashion, like basically an injection, for example, in the fat cells in your stomach fat, that then only changes the fat cells locally at that point, not the entire body. It doesn't travel further than that localized site, and then do whatever the genes are programmed to do, right? Like, so you can imagine you can do something like injecting something into that then changes those fat cells. Those fat cells then produce insulin on an ongoing, like, sort of even-keeled production schedule, let's say, rather than a momentary high dosage injection that people who suffer from diabetes, for example, have. So that's one example.
And I don't, so keep your thought, and I do a little bit of an insert here.
Please, yeah.
I was watching recently the Joe Rogan and Robert McCullough interview.
Yeah.
And Robert McCullough is a cardiologist, and he's a practicing physician. He's one of the outspoken people saying, whoa, wait, with all this stuff. But he says there actually is mRNA technology that he uses as a cardiologist, but it's like in an open heart surgery, you're like injecting it right into a little tiny bit of the heart. It's not something that goes widespread throughout your body. So when you said that, I was like, oh yeah. And I find like exciting and phenomenal and everything. The idea of doing a mass experiment on the whole planet, not so much.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly an area where ethics becomes a whole nother ball game, because it's not only that you're chained, like that you're, I don't know, performing it, you're harming somebody, but that you might be harming even their offspring, or that there's things that you just can't take back. It's a problem of restitution, impossibility to restitute. Yeah, all that stuff. So
you don't know.
But yeah, so that's another domain. And then what else is there? I mean, software is always the stuff that feels like it's the lowest barrier to entry, which is why most people enter it. And this tech stuff. There's other hardware stuff. I mean, Elon Musk is doing incredible things with batteries and all that kind of stuff. So there's many different areas of technology that are advancing fairly rapidly. AI being another one of them, although it's not really AI, it's more like super large-scale statistical accounting. That's what AI really is.
But here's one thing I was thinking about too in leading up to this, is that I remember back in about mid 1990s, right, when you were like still sucking your thumb, and but I remember, when the World Wide Web, and it was called the World Wide Web, right? And then we got into just web, and now we say the net or whatever. But back then, people everybody was on dial-up modems. You probably don't even, you probably never heard.
I caught the tailwind of that. I did, yeah. I caught the tailwind of that. Like, I still remember the noise that they made.
Yeah.
And like, you can't telephone at the point, and yeah.
Well, the very first ones, they didn't even have you didn't have a modem card in your computer. You had a modem, and you actually dialed up your phone and put it in there, because it was all, so it was, and they used baud, because they weren't even at a, I don't know, they really weren't even at a kilobit per second, right? So you had I think the last modem I had was a 14 kb at 14 kilobits per second or something, right? So I mean, it would take you 10 years to stream a Netflix show at that speed, right? But here I live in Thailand, and the internet is uniformly fantastic. I mean, even out in where I have a house out in rural Isan, 30 kilometers from the Cambodia border, it has a fiber connection, which the cost of which is $15 per month, right? And it's several hundred megabit up down. I mean, it's so good that you don't give a shit what's the true speed, right? Because I have a Netflix account that has, because for the family and everything, has I can have like 5 devices on it at one time. So I've actually tested this, streaming 4 HD, 4K HD movies from 4 HD TVs at the same time on Netflix over the same connection, 0 buffering. And I talk to people who live in rural areas in the United States who've given up with anything, any kind of streaming, because their internet connections are so crap. And I remember living in San Jose, California, and on a cable connection where it's kind of a loop, so so everybody's sharing, and every day when everybody gets home from work, it's kind of pointless to use anything, right?
I remember in 2020 when I was in Portugal, living there for about 6 months. I took a girl out to the beach side in Portugal at the coast, and we stepped in a van there and like looked at the stars in the evening. And one evening we were watching the stars, and like the stream of 6 or 8 different of stars flew by in one line. And what they are is Starlink satellites.
Oh, really?
That have been put up there by SpaceX. That are basically the basis of this huge like internet network that allows people even in rural areas to catch really high speed data, even though like there's still stuff to be worked out. But it's fascinating.
Yeah. That's good, because before that, I mean, the Hughes had a satellite network, but the service just sucks, right? We could go on and on and on about that. But my point in bringing that up is that the access to data streaming is for everybody, because now everybody has a phone, and pretty soon they're going to be 5G. I know there's a lot of controversy over that and whatnot. I don't know, but even 4G is, if you've got a good solid 4G connection, it's pretty fucking good. But the access to data is, and I'm talking to people in picking rice in rice paddies, because like here in Thailand, everybody has a smartphone. It's how they transact business, because here I laugh, because if you, as an American with an American bank account, right, you want to transfer money to someone else. Well, you can use your pay somebody in your bank account, and you can like write them a check, which they physically send in the fucking mail. It's hilarious. It's 2021, right? Yes, people still do this. There are people you go to American supermarkets and people still get out a checkbook and write a check, right? It's hilarious. Or you use PayPal or one of the other payers, and it's like, okay, 1 to 2 business days. But computers don't work on nights, they don't work on weekends, and they don't work on holidays. So, right, they can have your money in the float for, really up to 5 calendar days. In Thailand, there's about, I think roughly about 25 chartered national banks in Thailand. Now, every single bank has an app for, iPhone and Android, right? And every bank's app can send to every other bank's account. All you need is the name and the account number. That's all you need, right? You can send 10 baht, which is like, you can send 1 baht. It's cost nothing. And it's instantaneous, 0 cost, 24/7, 365, right? Now, when you understand that can be done, you know what an enormous fraud all the entire first world Western banking system is. They are fucking thieves. They're taking your money, and because they have that float, so it's 2 or 3 days of money coming in and going out, but there's always billions, even trillions of dollars there, and they're lending it back and forth to each other, or they're using it to do whatever. They're doing it because they make money off of it, right? Your money, right? So that is the sort of thing that ought to be disruptive. Another thing about that, there's a company called TransferWise. It's a UK company. It's called Wise. What?
I use them.
I use them now for 2 years. So get this. To send money from one of my 2 US-based banks to my Thai bank account would cost huge amounts. Like for a wire transfer of $1,000, you're talking $25 minimum for the transfer, and it's not instantaneous, right? So get this. I have a Wise account, and it has my bank domicile is a New York City bank. So I say, so I can put my money there from my Fidelity account or my USA account. To get it there, it's a standard 1 or 2 business day thing. But once it's there, I say, okay, open Wise. Okay, I want to put it in my Thai bank account. And I hit send, and it goes, done. That took 0.6 seconds from New York to Bangkok Bank in Thailand. And the transaction fee was maybe $3 for $1,000, right? And people will go, well, I need to do a wire transfer. I'm like, okay, get out your checkbook. I mean, this is the kind of, so what's tech? Obviously, Wise is a disruptive. I don't know how they're doing it. I've heard that they kind of pool funds. So they're doing, I don't know. But so speak to how tech is going to help us to stop all of these parasitic dinosaurs using 1950s legacy mainframe computer technology to be of service to us, right? I think you get everything I'm saying, right?
There's the short answer, just by outcompeting them.
Yep.
Then there's the long answer of, okay, how does it actually work? I mean, one of the things that they do have in their favor is that they're probably better in dealing with the regulations. So that's one of the things that all the incumbents have to face. They have to still comply with the same regulations, but have certain assumptions. You have all this different stuff. So I think a lot of the cost isn't really in developing the technology. It's more in making sure that you don't incur liability that you don't want to, that you can't insure. And so, but there are mechanisms other than just software to sort of to lessen the resource required. I mean, one of the things that I recently learned, which is quite interesting, is that there's this concept of mutual credit, not just a concept, but an actual way of doing credit debit accounting between agents in a network or participants in a network, let's say, where every positive balance is countered out by a corresponding negative balance and the other way around. So instead of having everybody has like a positive balance and sort of just us moving piles of objects back and forth, it's always that if I'm gaining, somebody else must be losing. I mean, that's happening in the normal banking system too, but in the normal banking system, you have a total, well, the normal banking system is based, or money even is based on this commodity theory of money, that there's like a certain number of objects that you can move around, and then you can collateralize them, you can lend them, you can borrow them, all this stuff. But the credit theory of money has a different assumption. It's more that it says that money is just a recognition and an accounting system for us extending each other credit, right? So it's a relational understanding. And so in a credit system of money, there's always, the total balance is zero, right? So because every positive is balanced out by negative. So that sounds like nerdy and all that stuff, but the interesting thing is that it's just a way of doing double entry accounting inside a network of participants. And we do this in companies all the time, right? Like the companies always do this double entry accounting thing, like accounts receivables, accounts payables, all of these things have to be always balanced out. Why did they start doing that? They started doing that to be able to track better what the flows were and to not be reliant on a single ledger. Like bankers, when they came up with double entry accounting, they did that so that both sides had both parts of the transaction in their books.
Well, now, that's what a basic balance sheet is, right?
Yeah, exactly. But so the point is, if you employ a system like this inside of an organization or of some kind of form of grouping where there's either some trust there or there's some membership requirement or some way of ensuring that inside problems get solved, then you can reduce the need for actual money by about 50% on average. So instead of when you're paying me, when you're doing something for me and I need to pay you, that you send me money, but instead of us doing that, instead you, like one of us goes into more positive and one of us goes into the negative. Like money is basically doesn't need to be moved around all the time because we have different needs for money at different points in time. So instead of moving money all the time, we can instead extend each other credit, and only when we then actually need to draw the resource for something else, we sort of go away from moving these balances back and forth. So we use money with strangers, right? Like, because we don't have a relationship with a stranger. I don't know the guy here at the counter, and probably tomorrow there will be a different guy at the counter. And so I don't have an ongoing relationship with this person or with this business, and therefore we want to close the value exchange of the exchange in the moment that it happens.
Sure.
But with people where there's an ongoing relationship, the need to pay them in the instant that the value gets exchanged can be deferred, right? Because the relationship continues to exist.
Yeah, it's kind of like having a bar tab.
Yeah, exactly. And except that in a system where that is for multiple economic participants, it starts to be that the debt isn't really to that one business, but it's to the network. And so if I perform value for somebody or create values for somebody else, and then my balance increases, I'm good again. So
it can flow through the network. Yeah. Now how about more of the? So let's speak a little bit to, because I talked earlier about how everybody is getting to have access pretty fast data all the time. I mean, it's getting more and more where everyone has like really fast streaming data connections, whether you're on your Wi-Fi at home or whether you grab your phone and you leave and it switches to the local tower and jumps tower to tower as you go somewhere, right? Which works pretty brilliantly now. I mean, it's pretty damn good. Everywhere except the United States. I mean, it's funny. Everywhere in the world I go is
same in Germany.
Better. You know, U.S. cell service sucks. Internet sucks. They're like a third one. They Americans have no idea how low on the list they are in terms of good internet. You know, I'm here in what Americans call a third world country. It's not. It's a developing country, right? But the internet here, everywhere I've been in 2 years, kicks ass on Americans. Kicks their ass, right? And they sit there so like, we're Americans, God country. Yeah, it's funny to me sometimes, right? But it always has been ever since I lived in Japan in the 80s, you know. But since I'm American, I like, it's kind of like how you make fun of your own brother, right? But nobody else can, right? It's kind of like that. So what about just the data? So let me give you an example. So I'm thinking I talked about this whole blockchain domain. Obviously, when it takes, what is it, 10 minutes on average, I guess, to send Bitcoin to somebody, and it's actually fairly expensive. So obviously, we're not going to be watching HD movies served up by a blockchain network anytime soon, right?
We don't need to either. There's actually better cryptographic technology for that.
Now, here's the thing. Now, I preface this by saying, I am happy to pay to watch a film that I want, where I know it's out. When I go to a place like now, Google, even YouTube. So Google stopped their Play thing, which I could easily rent a movie from here in Thailand, and everything is in YouTube now. Well, okay, but here's the thing. Unless I go through a VPN, I can't access the where they moved all the renting movies to in YouTube, because you can't do it in Thailand. And this is a constant frustration for a lot of international people. It's like I pay you, I have an account. Why it's the internet, which is worldwide. Why in the fuck do you care where I physically am? Right? And it's all these legacy stupid contacts because musicians and movie filmmakers are the stupidest people on the face of the planet. So I prefer to pay, but when I can't, I say, look, if I can get it on torrent, then I'll do it, and fuck you, right? Now, so that technology has been around. I was not interested back when you had to download, burn it to a DVD, and I had friends that did that. They download shit, they burn it to a DVD, and then they watch it on a player. But now the technology is such that you can stream it, right? You use popcorn time for it's almost like Netflix, really, which I use a lot. But sometimes there's not enough nodes, so then I use uTorrent to download, and it has a player and stuff like that. That's a bit especially popcorn time. It's like you click on it, and if you got a good connection and there's enough of the nodes, which what means is that the files are out there on enough other users' computers like yours that they can serve it up. And I get like download speeds here in Thailand of like upwards of 50 megabits, 50 megabits a second. So literally the entire movie downloads in a couple minutes, but it starts streaming as soon as it has enough of a buffer, So that's a technology that's actually pretty old. So what about that?
Yeah, they've been around for, I don't know, 20, 30 years now, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it was the Napster music sharing people who kind of invented that, right?
It's called distributed hash tables, and the technology is called distributed hash tables. It's basically just, how your computer has a file system and you have to see these folders and so on. It's that same thing, but except that it makes the assumption that any device in the system can drop off at any point in time. So it has to have a way to tell these things apart and for things to connect to each other, and that's it. Just breaks down all these files. But anyway,
what I get from it is I'm downloading and the file is saving itself on my local drive. And it has a limited, I think I don't know what it's limited to, but it's also like spitting out to the network too. Same.
Yep. It's just getting and giving, exactly.
Yeah, that's a give and take sort of thing, right there, right? So as long as there's enough people doing it, that's a cool thing. But what it is, so is that a technology that has bigger or longer legs ultimately?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, the technology that I most favor and that I have a hand in developing, not like at the core, but the community and ecosystem, is called Holochain. And they make use of distributed hash table technology, which is the streaming thing, to do all the data sharing between nodes. And so, it's much more performant than blockchain. And there's definitely more legs. The problem with the existing DHT stuff is that, one, there's nobody who can, you have this problem of spam and of viruses, right? Because there's nobody preventing bad uploads to this table. You have to be more discerning in what you actually download to your own computer because it might have a virus, right? Yeah. And of course you have like these sites that try to take down stuff that isn't good and so on. But the other problem that you have is it's just file sharing. Like there's no computing logic that happens, right? Like there's no, like you send me a message, I like reply, like we do calls, like that stuff doesn't work that way. So that's what Holochain I think adds, and what some of these other technologies that aren't really talked about in the blockchain space because they don't have this money thing attached to them offer to the world, and have been for a while.
Well, that's an interesting thing. So if you have basically a very, very fundamental, low grade, it's just a file sharing system, right? Then it seems to me you can build apps that whatever the application is, it just has a plugin into this sort of file sharing for whatever data, and then you are processing the data on your own end, whether it be an app on your phone or the desktop on your computer or whatever. But it's the data, and I think that's kind of how the whole BitTorrent thing kind of amazes me how fucking simple it is, right? It's like, wow, that really works, It
doesn't need a token, doesn't need anything like that.
Yeah, right. Okay, so all right, so I don't want to we talked about tech now. I don't want to we don't need to discuss the ins and outs of, a coronavirus this or coronavirus that, or vaccines this or vaccines that. Whatever anyone thinks about that, we have a situation where the world has generally been perhaps irrevocably transformed in the space of 2 years, right? For better or worse. So, for worse, I mean, everyone generally assumes that I mean, certainly there's been tons of harm done. Whatever you think about the severity of whatever, I just don't really want to even go there. But plus, everyone knows what I think about it anyway. Bullshit. So so everyone assumes like we've had devastating economic damage, harm, personal, psychological, for children, you know, on and on and on and on it goes, right? So you are a young man, right? So I'll be 61 in a couple of weeks, or a week. What is it? Yeah, a week or so. Tough 2 weeks, right? And so for me, it's easy for me to say, the world's fucked. I'm gonna die soon anyway. You know, probably, you know, maybe I can last another 30 years. Probably not. I drink and smoke too much. But the someone like you have your whole life. I can remember what it was like, you know, when I was 29. I was living in Japan. It's like I couldn't get enough pussy, enough of anything, right? So and the last thing you were when you're that age is, and if you have some money, and a 1000cc motorbike that you ride to Tokyo, you're certainly not like worried about much of anything. So in spite of the last 2 years, first of all, has it shocked you the last 2 years?
I mean, there wasn't a point in time at which I experienced like shock and awe in that sense. I mean, everything that happened felt understandable and explainable, even though it certainly wasn't something I welcomed in the severity of it. I mean, I do remember that I was very early to notice this Corona thing happening, and then already predicting it was going to be in Germany very soon and all this kind of stuff. But I was also then one of the people who then started to see, okay, the statistics don't seem to line up with the severity that's it's made out to be, and there are usually ways to mitigate the problems that it causes in the people who aren't like old and have other health insurance. Anyway, but the interesting thing, as you identify, is less about the virus and the disease that it causes, but more exactly about what its existence has made possible in terms of authority being able to justify interventions into our lives. And so what it portends to me is that we're now entering sort of a new epoch or era that is going to be focused around biology as the justificationary tool for things, rather than religion or rights or stuff like that.
So, anything. All we have to do is tell you the science, and if the narrative, the science narrative, is such that that you need to be protected, or we need to protect the people you associate from you, so we can essentially just.
We need to protect you from yourself, even, right?
Yeah.
Like that's
yeah. Well, yeah, you know, and you know, a long time ago in the U.S., when they came up with a motorcycle helmet law, I think it's going back to the 70s, right? You have to wear a helmet, right? Helmet law, right? And a lot of people at the time said, why? If they want to risk their own skulls, who cares, right? Oh no, we need to do it. We need to do it. Well, you know, it's like the old saying, you know, everybody wants the government to burn those books. When they say burn those books, that's the exact same power when another group comes along and says burn your books, right? And this is simple shit. But the problem is that what, for me, what this last 2 years has shown me is just how fucking stupid almost everybody in the world is. I mean, right? and but on the bright side of it, how privileged I have been in my own discernment, because most people that I know, like I'm talking well over 90%, think the whole thing's bullshit, just like I do, right? So that tells you that like I've always said, I collect smart people, and so I'm very good there. But okay, but what I want to ask you is, do you see, in spite of, we're talking like silver lining in the cloud, we're talking lemonades out of lemons. So what do you see that what's transpired in the last year gives young people like yourselves obvious opportunities to, make the world better in your thinking? All right.
I mean, one thing that's come out of it that I welcome, although I don't know that everybody does, is that the switch to digital first for nearly everything has been accelerated by like 10, 20 years, like in this short time frame. Like I think now between 14 and 18% of the US workforce is working remotely, and that was 2% before the pandemic. So that's a massive acceleration that with that amount of people just being remote, it's become an entire sector of the workforce that can't be ignored and like has to be accommodated somehow. And not only that, but also it makes it possible for young people especially, but also others, to move into rural towns or places where there's less of a population, to be able still to be connected in the global marketplace, to earn a living, but also have lower costs and raise children and all this kind of stuff, be around nature, be in places where you're not having to measure every interaction you even have with a friend in terms of, oh, is this an opportunity cost I'm currently paying versus I could be working more, right? So yeah.
Well, that's a fucking awesome point. And because, I've said for many years that one of the reasons for very hard left socialism is because of urbanity. Because back in the day, if you wanted to make money, you had to go to a city. You crowd in there, where everybody can walk to every place and easily get back. So it facilitates trade, right? With digital communication, you don't need it. And plus we have means of shipping that it's crazy. I mean, when I was in the Bay Area, California, sometimes I could order something on Amazon and I literally get it 3 hours after I ordered it, by their own truck network, because I lived reasonably close to one of their distribution centers, right?
I'm not sure that's a good thing, but yes.
Yeah, well, okay. But it's part and parcel of this thing of like, I was living off grid up on the East Hills of San Jose. And so it's kind of a pain in the ass to fight traffic and go to a store, and I could just go on Amazon and boom, the truck brings it to me, right? But then the other part of this too is I've always, for many years, because I know so many business people and they're constantly traveling on business trips. And I've always thought, I'll bet you a good 80% of all this business travel, right, flying here and there and there and there, is not really essential. They can get on it. I mean, how many people can you put on a fucking Zoom call now? I've been on Zoom calls where there's like 40, 50 people, screens, and it's all working, right? So is the business meeting really, or is it just costing your company money, which goes into the prices that you charge your customers, which makes you less competitive than the other business who says, look, you really have to have a fucking really good fucking reason to get on an airplane to fly out there, and especially use the private jet, which actually we got rid of because we don't really need a private jet anymore, right? So would you say that another silver lining to all of this is because of the economic damage. Well, except for the big companies who are essential. Were essential. So that, you've seen the figures about how many billionaires made many more billions during all of this, while hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of other small companies went under, right, during the whole thing. That's part of the evil of it. But we're looking at what can come out of this. And it's so that a lot of companies, right, maybe they start figuring out ways to tighten their belts in terms of cost, do more for less. One of the great stories, I don't think it's probably true anymore, but one of the great stories is when Walmart was a smaller company trying to become a big company, right? And back then you had to do corporate travel. When they did, their managers and executives who went on corporate trips flew coach, and they stayed in like a Best Western motel, right? So is that part of this too? Or do you just use digital to save costs?
I think, yeah, I mean, digital is one side. Yeah, I mean, anytime that a downturn occurs, people have to make more hard choices about what sticks around, what doesn't. Now that, of course, is associated with pain, but yeah, efficiency can come from that. But yeah, sure. I mean, sometimes I think like probably the best investment that a business could make that's run by a boomer is in like learning how to 10-finger type instead of like two finger searching, right? Like just the bandwidth of communication is sometimes
it's so hilarious. It's so hilarious.
You spend half an hour writing an email that's like, I don't know, like 3 paragraphs long. Like I can do that in, I don't know, 30 seconds.
Well, what's hilarious to me is I never took a typing course. I just began using the keyboard back, I guess in 80, I think it was 83. My college roommate got one of the very first computers called a K-Pro. It was like a metal box, and I started writing my term papers in college on that, right? And at first my girlfriend was doing it for me because I just didn't, but I just kept persisting at it. But I never took a typing course. And today, if you ask me, how can I type? And I use all of my fingers, every single one, right? But I have no idea where they're going. That's why I have to use a QWERTY keyboard, because, and that messes me up when I go on some of the keyboards that are like, oh, I know. When I'm like doing, if I'm like using my Roku stick or something plugged into a TV in a hotel, and I have to log in to Netflix or something like that, or, log into something, and the keyboard, I'm like, fuck, because it's not QWERTY. Because my mind just has mapped it, but if you ask me, okay, where is A, B, C, I can't tell you. I don't even look, and my fingers just do it, right? So who knows? But yeah, you're right. So what else in terms of really good shit coming down the pipeline? I mean,
one of the things, when there's hardship, then people need to usually pool resource in some way or another. And I think what we have been missing for a while is a language of pooling resources that isn't socialist, like it isn't oriented around socialism, but it's oriented around just commons, the idea of just groups doing things together that doesn't necessarily have a political side as an angle, like slant in it. So I think that would be something that I would hope for. I don't know that it will happen, but I would hope for that the conversation and a conversation would develop, and the term would increase in usage of commons, and that people could ally and rally around a shared language of yes, we have to pool resources for some things. How do we do that best? Yes, probably people who can't contribute to it should maybe still want to benefit from it, but maybe only in certain ways, or they have to give up something else. Like this kind of language of giving and getting, of trading off things rather than just taking and giving to people that just giving to people from other by taking from others. So this voluntary or at least enjoyed contribution to things where people are coming together to do things. So
there's historical business precedent for that called insurance companies, but not just insurance companies, but there's some business structures that's a special form of business called a mutual company.
Yes, right? and also there used to be what's called friendly societies, which is actually what the insurances came out of, which pioneered this model, right? Like of working men usually putting in a small part of their wages every week into a shared pool, and then being able to afford shared healthcare. And actually, as far as if my historic understanding is correct, then it actually ended up being that they were able to afford so good healthcare that actually the doctors as a profession were starting to get unhappy about the people of lower class being able to afford such good healthcare, and then lobbied the government to basically raise the bar to entry and make the costs go higher and all this kind of stuff. So,
well, yeah. The current healthcare is a disaster, simply because it's the same thing as higher education. Higher education and healthcare is if you look at the two things, they're super high cost for one reason. For one basic reason, it's easy to spend other people's money, or at least you perceive it's other people's money, and especially for the student, it's that I'll get to it later. It's a loan, right? This is going to make me big money, and the college says we can basically charge what we want because the loan is guaranteed or whatever it is, right? So boom, the costs just keep going up and up and up and up and up because it's not a typical business arrangement where you say, hey, I want an education. Well, okay, it's going to cost you $50,000 a year. You're like, fuck off. I'll give you two.
That's another industry that I think is probably going to benefit education or online education, or just education expanding from away from college as the default mode. I mean, there are some really cool models I've been tracking for a number of years. One of them is, for example, called Praxis. And what they do is you apply to them. They're rather selective in who they then actually accept, but basically they take you through a program where you do a 3-month sort of online boot camp of just learning the basics of writing, of creating your own website, of documenting your learning process, of building your brand. And then at the end of those 3 months, you enter a 3-month placement period where you apply to businesses in the network of this organization that are either startups or growing businesses or just functioning sustainable businesses. And then you work at that business for 6 months straight, making money already from the very first day that you work for them. And at the end of the program, you end up with a basic education and like sort of the basics of the humanities, like philosophy, literature, and so on. You end up with your own website, your own brand. You end up with 6 months of work experience, and you come out positive, money positive. You've actually earned money rather than spent money. So it's a complete turnaround. And like this is fairly common. This used to be how we did and how we still do in Germany, what's called vocational trainings or trade schools or apprenticeships, where you go there, you learn from them, you earn your money, and you learn by doing things. So I think that will definitely experience another boost. And we're seeing this now. The online learning sector is becoming professionalized at a rate that is quite stunning. Like,
that's one good thing to say about Germans. My sense is they still have a solemn respect for people who are competent at doing hands-on things, right? And they really are, and that really that's in France too, like someone who can bake bread and do cheese and everything. That's why like for in France, like the baker, the boulangerie, and the cheesemaker and all these other artisans, right? it doesn't go away because they have high respect amongst the population. Who knows whether that lasts? Maybe it goes back because people start saying, hey, you know what? I want to go back and live in the village again. I have a good internet connection. I have Zoom, which we're on right now. I can stream movies when I want to. I can get books. I can get staple needed stuff delivered to me, and it's a more chill life sort of thing. And rather than the rat race, right? Which is really, I mean, the whole urban model is kind of old technology, right?
What do you mean by that?
Well, living in densely packed urban environments with high rises, with retail on the first floor, basically, right? I mean, well, you have to keep Paris for sure, because that's one of the coolest, right? And I've never been to Berlin, so I don't know. But Paris is cool. Rome is cool. San Francisco is cool. Downtown San Francisco is cool. If you get rid of all the needles, poop on the sidewalks and everything. I mean, it's hilarious how they ruined that city, right? But never cared about LA. LA is not a true city. New York, I suppose. Yeah, I like, downtown New York. But there's very few just really fucking cool cities, all the rest, I think they can go away. I'm not saying force them to go away. I'm just saying, people, as they realize.
Make them compete.
What?
Make them compete.
Yes, let them compete, right? Well, see, this is one good thing about this whole thing. And another bright thing that I've talked to so many Europeans here who learned something from COVID, and Texas and Florida taught them, because they had no idea that a state in the US can say, fuck you, or let's go Brandon, or fuck Joe Biden. They can, right? In great many things. There's very, very little actually the federal government can do to impose upon states, right? And so, like, Florida with Ron DeSantis as governor has become like a shining light around the world. I talk to people, they're like, I want to go to Florida every day.
I'm establishing my LLC in Florida.
Good for you, right? See, because you know what, and here's the thing. Now, who knows? Leaderships change, right? But I think DeSantis is building such a legacy as Florida, as a shining light. If I were to leave Thailand, that's where I would want to go. And for one, I'm acclimated to the weather. I've gotten to, in 2 years, I've gotten to where I love hot and humid. I do. I just love it, right? I walk around in shorts. I have a shirt on just because of the video. It'd say that I put on a shirt. I wear a shirt for probably less than an hour or two every day, right? All year round, right? So yeah, I love that. But yeah, we could. Here's the thing. I think in terms of COVID, we see the narrative kind of crumbling. I like to think of it as it's fighting a war on many fronts. Before, it could beat back every challenge, whatever it was, this way or that way. Now it's got the challenge from all fucking sides, and the vaccines are quickly showing themselves to have been not only a bad joke, but potentially bad, potentially for long-term effects for some people. So if you look at the science. Anything more to add, Moritz?
I mean, I'm looking optimistic into the future, but I think that's mostly because, I mean, larger things, I see there are some things going well, but also on a personal level, I feel like I'm connected to people who are moving things in the right direction. And so on the day to day, I'm just seeing progress everywhere, even though I know that it's not the same experience for everybody. So I guess, yeah.
Well,
so.
Well, you probably, you pick and choose who you surround yourself with and work with, right? Obviously, you're even before this whole thing came down, you weren't like dealing with, your average factory worker somewhere, or your average healthcare worker who, just as an aside, I wonder, I keep asking people, why is it an issue that so many healthcare workers, nurses and such especially, who work in ERs and know pretty much everything really on the ground, how come so many of them are vaccine hesitant? Have you ever asked yourself that? Why would the people giving out the shots, why would there be such a high percentage of them who say, nope, I'm not getting it? Right? Isn't that kind of an obvious fucking question to ask?
Yes, they're all racists.
Yeah, they're racists, right? Yes, they're racists.
That's because they don't like vaccines.
Because that's an obvious racist, yes. Yeah, you got your answer lined up like that, right?
I'm trained like a Pavlovian dog. Yes.
Yeah. Pavlovian dog. There you go. All right. Okay, so we have to do this again. That's good. This is just a bit of a ramble, right? Anything you want to say?
Shooting the shit.
What?
Well, just shooting the shit. But yeah, I mean, if anybody who watched this felt like there was something interesting and compelling to them, or they want to learn more, feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure Nick and Richard will put some contact details in the description or anything.
Yeah, yeah. Send me them in text on our Telegram thing, and I'll include those so where to find you, or however much you want to be contacted. Of course, if you get contacted people who are my fans, I guarantee you at least 10 out of 10 will be smart people. So you don't have to.
Oh no.
No morons watch my shit or read my shit. Not at all. Zero. That's right. That's why I do what I do. They say
you drive away the people who have a problem with the rough exterior.
Exactly. Richard, why are you such an asshole to blah, 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 blah? I say, because it saves me time. Right?
Safe space for smart people.
Saves me time, keeps it open for that. Okay. Moritz, let me stop the recording here. Stay on, and we'll chat for a last minute. Bye, everybody.